Welcome, everybody, to Wrestling with Sarcasm, the debut episode. My name is the overly excited That Damn Dave Shaw. I am excited to be producing the very first edition of this podcast. It's going to be a hot, steaming pile of garbage, I'm sure, but we are going to get better each and every week. The idea behind the podcast is to do something that is contrary to what professional wrestling is all about, and that is exercise some element of restraint and brevity. This is not a New Japan 6-hour pay-per-view. This is not even an Extreme Rules 4-hour pay-per-view. This is a 30-minute podcast. We dig into 2 topics each episode. We have a hard time limit on each one. We don't do recaps. We don't do hit or miss. We don't do a million random segments. We don't do, let's talk about what I had for lunch that day. We might do that. I take that back. We might do that. But we're going to keep it to 2 topics each week. And the reason that we do that is to provide some level of insight, some level of conversation around a topic that maybe doesn't get the same amount of Twitter love, doesn't get the same amount of retweet bullshit conversation on Twitter, doesn't have a million hot takes from the Barry Alvarez's of the world. And instead, we get to focus on something that's a little bit different, a little bit more in-depth, a little bit offbeat, a little bit more unique. Today, we have 2 topics for you. The first one is probably not the thing that I thought was going to lead off the first episode of this podcast, and that is the thing that used to be the worst named promotion on earth, that is TNA, now known as Impact, Canada's, golden sun. We're going to talk about the Slammiversary pay-per-view a little bit, but we're mostly going to talk about TNA's ability to pivot, which in any walk of life, in any corporation, my day job is as a marketing consultant. That is a very difficult thing for an organization to do, even when you go through an ownership change. For them to come out the other side of that and be able to have some level of an identity that is different than the Lucha Undergrounds of the world, the Ring of Honors, and then certainly the WWEs of the world, and do it with probably the worst fucking rating, if you had to measure it at the time, the worst kind of perception of what that product was all about, was probably held by the thing that used to be TNA. That's what it was. And to have some level of a product that we can respect and be interested in is a pretty big deal. And that's what we're going to spend the bulk of the time on today. Topic 2 today, we're not going to dig in quite to the depth that we're going to dig into Slammiversary, but we are going to talk about the complete absurdity, ridiculousness of what it means to physically pose people in your company at a particular place on an entryway ramp in relation to your overall perception of who they are. We're going to talk about the Stephanie McMahon Evolution announcement. We're not going to do it from the standpoint of what it means to have a women's pay-per-view. We're going to talk about it from the standpoint of what the fuck was going on that stage. So that's going to be topic 2 today. As always, you can find us on the interwebs at www.wrestlingwithsarcasm.com. The www is probably redundant nowadays, but whatever, I already said it. You can find us on Twitter at SarcasmPod, because all of the good wrestling-related Twitter handles were taken, and so that's where we're at. Feel free to tweet at us, add us. We'll be glad to follow you back, and that's a place to stay connected to the show in between episodes. Topic 1. You might remember TNA from these days. Yeah, that's the thing that Hulk Hogan ruined after he ruined the previous thing that we all liked. Actually, you might remember it from this guy.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo!
Yeah, that is a glory day that is long past. And was long past when Ric Flair was bleeding profusely with a busted elbow in a cage in Philadelphia at a show that I was at with my then ex-girlfriend, who I think was horrified, and is probably the reason we did not get married. That is TNA. That was TNA. And for us to be able to look at them now and say, you're not TNA. You're not hashtag LOL TNA anymore. You are Impact Wrestling, and you offer something that's a little bit different to the wrestling public than some of the other organizations that are out there. And the thing that I think unlocked that for them was the Hardy lawsuit. And this is wrestling lore. At this point, it's been kind of co-opted by the WWE in their own way in their documentary about the Hardys. But when they left, there was a fight, as you guys know, about the Broken Hardy gimmick. And that fight shed a lot of light on what Impact was, or what TNA was, and what Impact chose to be going forward. There was an inflection point between two sides of the argument. The first kind of period of that argument was TNA trying to get paid. TNA mistakenly believing that WWE was their primary competitor, and hurting them in some way would help TNA. They wanted to get some money out of it. They wanted to get some notoriety out of it. They wanted something out of the deal. And they held very firmly to that, to the point of pissing off pretty much everybody involved, including every fan that wanted to see that gimmick, that wanted to see the Hardys go back to where they came from and succeed on a level that they hadn't succeeded on their way out. And there was an inflection point somewhere in the middle of that argument where somebody said, you know what, this is not a winning proposition for us. Trying to take a little tiny bite out of the WWE is never going to affect them. Now even post-TV money affect them even less. This is not a game that we're going to win. And it would instead behoove us, yep, I'm going to use the word behoove on this fucking podcast. It would behoove us to be known as a place where creators can come create. So if you are Sami Callihan, let's say, you're the Christ brothers, and you want to create this thing called OVE, and you ultimately someday get signed by the WWE, or you get signed by whoever else, and you want to use that gimmick, and you want to use that name, and you want to use all the hand signs, and you want to say that you're from the rough streets of Dayton, which I find kind of laughable, but let's say that you do want to say that, then we as TNA, we are people that are going to allow and empower you to own that gimmick going forward. This is a place where you can come and be kind of supported as a creator and artist, where there are other places, and it's not just WWE, but take Lucha Underground as another example, a place where the contract is such that if you use your name here, you can't use it somewhere else. If you're Prince Puma, you can't be Ricochet in WWE. You can't even go to WWE, in fact. And I think when they had that moment and they saw some of the goodwill come through in that decision by releasing the gimmick, letting Matt do it, letting, Rebby Sky stop sending them shitty tweets every 4 hours, and letting fans see what they wanted to see, there was a little bit of goodwill trafficked back towards Impact Wrestling. And I think maybe even more important than the goodwill from fans, there was goodwill from wrestlers who saw that as an empowering stance, treating them like the creators and artists that they are, treating them as incentivized in a way to come up with something new and interesting that would ultimately benefit Impact, but benefits them as well down the line. That is called aligning your incentives with the people who work for you. In doing that, you have empowered an entire new generation of wrestlers to look at Impact Wrestling a little bit differently. And I don't think fan perception was immediately, fixed by that move. But it does empower you to recruit in a little bit more compelling way to say, come here and create, and we're going to empower you to do that. And if you want to go off into the future, and if you want to make more money at a much bigger competitor, then God help you, let's do it. And you can see how that one decision has changed the trajectory of what Impact Wrestling has been since then. They are running joint shows. They ran, during WrestleMania weekend, a Lucha Underground versus Impact show. They are interacting and supporting the Chris Jericho cruise with Sami Callihan and promoting it as a battle of the promotions. They are embracing Bone Soldier, for example, to come over and run a show and do that in a way where they're giving some level of recognition to New Japan and also benefiting from that recognition from New Japan fans. Pentagon Jr. came out for his match on the Slammiversary pay-per-view, and he did so in a way that was credentialed immediately by the announcers to say, this is somebody who has had success everywhere he's gone. He is a past Lucha Underground champion. He is a past AAA champion. There is some building of that character that benefits from context that is not myopic to view only what we're watching as the only thing in wrestling, and instead referring to it in the context of everything else, which, by the way, makes the moment bigger, makes it say to somebody who might not know that, oh shit, Pentagon's an even bigger deal than I thought he was. Now, in Impact, that's maybe not necessarily needed for him because he's a former world champion. But to do that with everyone else on the roster, to refer to Ishimori, Bone Soldier, as part of Bullet Club, is a big credentialing moment to say, yeah, and he's on our show. Acknowledging this overall kind of tapestry of wrestling and all the different federations that are out there, all the different companies that are out there, is an empowering thing, not only for me as the viewer to enjoy what I'm watching a little bit more, but as a wrestler, you are now benefiting from all of the great work you've done elsewhere. You are now the sum of all that activity, rather than, there is another model, the WWE model, where you basically have to pretend like none of that existed. And to suggest that it existed has to be done in some kind of ridiculous work shoot, Paul Heyman pipe bomb kind of a bullshit thing that is not organic, which lands with like 10% of the audience and does nothing other than kind of like give us a little inside joke chuckle because we're the smarks that we are to say like, oh, haha, Baron Corbin talks shit about that indie worker. That does nothing for anybody. It's frustrating. I think we all saw this in the recent renamings of a couple of people who were recruited to the Performance Center. As, there's such a myopic view when you're in WWE to scrub out everything that happened before and scrub out all of the people that were there in the past if you don't view them on good terms. If you are CM Punk and you have the record for most days as champion, well, fuck you, we don't like you anymore, so Brock's going to take that record from you. If you are AJ Lee, similar story, spoiler alert, well, we're going to take that record from you too. We are so myopic that we don't even want to, in retrospect, admit that people left or that there was success held by people that we perhaps don't hold in high esteem. It's one thing to say that Chris Benoit is kind of scrubbed from all verbal mentions. It's another to say CM Punk never worked here. It's a level of ridiculous that only they can get away with because they are such a dominant player in the marketplace. There was a run on those documentaries on the network, the Monday Night Wars documentary being one of them, or the series, where about every 10 minutes they would trot Eric Bischoff out there in his like slimy slug costume, and he would say something about trying to pivot away from what WWF/E was offering at the time. So, in his words, or in his mind, if they're offering a bunch of lumbering giant people, well, then we're going to have cruiserweights in WCW. And if they're forced to be on tape delay, well, we're going to go live. That is a pretty simple concept called differentiation. And that simply means being different from your competitor, offering something that is different than what everyone else is offering as a means of getting more customers. And in his view of the world, he was trying to get more customers away from WWF or to recruit people that didn't care for that product, might like wrestling, maybe remember who Ric Flair is, and came back, right? So if you are TNA/Impact, you are faced with that same requirement. You have to be something different and better for somebody to care about who you are, especially when, there are studies that you can do around a brand's reputation, where you ask people, like, what do you think about Pepsi? And what do you think about Coke? And what are the first 10 words you associate? And all this kind of bullshit. If you did that for Impact Wrestling, you would have gotten probably Jeff Hardy being coked out of his brain, or Sting wrestling maybe forever longer than he should have, or Kurt Angle like doing every possible physical thing to make you think he was going to die in the ring, These are the things that you would mention. You would mention ridiculous finishes, or you would mention, like, whatever, pick your terrible match of the past 20 years, 15 years that Impact's been around. That's what you would probably associate it with. They were starting from a low point. They were starting from a not just low awareness that was bad, which is an even worse situation to be in. And when faced with that decision, they had to find some level of differentiation, and that differentiation is what WWE is, we are not. This is not a time where we can call up asshole. That theme song is not coming down the ramp to save us, right? And to presume that we were going to go live and we were going to hire all the same people and we were going to get some of their old talent and we're going to beat WWF at their own game is absurd. If you listen to documentaries about Jim Crockett Promotions and people who worked at both Jim Crockett and WWE, it was clear to them who was going to win because WWE had the money advantage. They had an advantage in production, in presentation, in the quality of the product. Crockett definitely had some benefits. Ric Flair, a different style, some regional strongholds, but did not have the attention to the product that matched them up. And when they tried to compete head-to-head, they tried to be the same thing. They got fucked. They got completely 100% fucked. They were out-businessed, out-qualitied, out-everythinged by the WWE, and they died. WCW, just by the fact that they had a shit ton of money, was able to compete and beat them for a long time. But they were, towards the end, not that different from what the WWF product was, other than a shittier version of the same thing. WWF had to go way extreme, right, to get some differentiation across from what they used to be, which is what WCW was copying. They came back in a leadership position kind of to the center of who they were, where WCW already was, and found no way to evolve. They just never changed, and then they died. And so if you're Impact, you cannot follow that same blueprint and think that you're going to be successful. And the proof is in what is the quality of your TV package today. It's the third worst that it's been, and there's only been 3. So faced with that, they had to say, what's different? Okay, so WWE, if I go sign there, I can't go anywhere else. Save, like, the reclamation project of Apollo Crews maybe being allowed to leave the building. Like, you're not allowed to really go anywhere else and make a name for yourself with any other promotion. Okay, well, as Impact, let's say that that's fine. You can go wherever you want. As long as you hit our dates, then you can ply your trade wherever you want. When you're WWE, maybe hit or miss. Sometimes I get to keep my name, and sometimes I'm Hideo Itami. Everything I create under your umbrella, you own. Okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're Impact. We're going to be something different. You want to be Broken Matt Hardy? Do it. Woken, Broken, we don't care. Go ahead and do what you want. You want to be OVE anywhere else in the world? Go do it. You want to be Sami Callihan, you want to be Pentagon Jr., you can want to be whatever else. That's fine. And that is a fundamentally different business model that the WWE will not ever go after. They will never wholesale say, yep, everybody can take whatever they want, no matter where they go. That has never been the case. That will never be the case. So that is a good place for them to be. Even in their more relatable competition of Lucha Underground, it's an advantage over them yet. Lucha is so restrictive in some of their contracts that other people can't appear either anywhere else that has television distribution or under the same name. Well, okay, well, fuck them. We will do the exact opposite of that. And the ultimate impact of all of that stuff, pun intended, not really, not pun intended, that's ridiculous. The ultimate result of all of that is you have now attracted a talent level that is better than it was, 5 or 10 years ago. The talent level that they have to work with is simply better than it's ever been. And they have done that by opening the doors to people that are, famous in other walks of life and other promotions. And that raises the overall card, raises the overall perception of the promotion such that if you have any rudimentary skill in storytelling, you're able to put on a Slammiversary pay-per-view where every match had a build. And the builds were not super complex and not super complicated, and there were things that we understood, and everybody hates each other. There are stakes in many of the matches. There are reasons for these people to fight. Maybe the first match notwithstanding, which was more of just, look at all these cool acrobats that we have. Everything else had a pretty fucking legitimate story behind it. And when you have a focus on growing talent that cares, empowering them to exercise some amount of creativity in their jobs, and then put that together with some storytelling, which isn't like bending over backwards to fuck us in a Westworld mind warp kind of a way, as WWE sometimes tries to do, or just abandons altogether, pick your day, then that is a compelling card to the point where there was more buzz around this card for that company than there had been in a very long time. I watched it. I haven't watched 1 minute of Impact since Jeff Hardy came out coked up. I had not watched 1 minute. And I watched that thing front to back, and it was great. There were low points. There were things that I didn't care for. But if you watch that show, if you're into lucha, there was lucha. If you're into blood and thumbtacks and staples, that was all there. If you want some nostalgia, Tommy Dreamer and his fat body were just waddling around that ring and really giving it a shot. If you, for some reason, like Hernandez, I'd like to meet you. I don't think you exist, but if you did, his fat ass was walking around that ring too. If you wanted some work rate, that certainly existed. If you wanted Austin Aries because he's badass, that was there. If you wanted intense promos, that was there too. All of it was there. And it was assembled in a way that would draw in different types of people, and that's what you need because they're trying to get the biggest audience there is. And unfortunately for them, their reputation is such garbage that they're going to have to put on, 5, 10, 15 of these shows. Redemption was good, which was the previous pay-per-view. This one was good. Great. I'm going to need a few more of those for me to buy in a more regular way, for me to certainly want to find it on Pop. But even maybe more importantly than that, find it on the big show weekends. And to do that across enough people to make it an even more viable promotion to maybe they can get out of like grade F cable TV and go up a couple of notches to like Nat Geo or some shit. they're going to need to put on a series of these shows, but it was an amazing start. So if you have not watched the show, I would definitely recommend going to see it. It's hard to recommend a single match. I didn't care for the women's match, but pretty much everything else had something that you could latch onto and be interested in. Even the women's match, just the theatrics of it, and kind of the ridiculousness of coffins and undead brides and all this kind of stuff is ridiculous enough to maybe find some compelling parts to. So even watch that. So that's going to wrap up topic 1, but last commercial for Slammiversary, I think it was an important time for them to show off kind of the fruits of what a strategic pivot for them was. In a Pied Piper video chat kind of a, twist of fate. Jesus, I hope I didn't just say twist of fate. I think I did. In a twist of reality, that this thing that used to be TNA that Jeff Jarrett just murdered into the ground, Isaiah Thomas style with the CBA, and instead put on a compelling show that has an interesting champion and lots of storylines and something that I can spend 20 minutes talking about on a podcast, that is certainly a victory for them. End of topic 1 for today. Topic 2 today, we are going to dig in something a little more absurd than Slammiversary. As absurd as railroad spikes are during a wrestling show, that is pretty absurd. More absurd than that. Stephanie McMahon came out. Weird. We were empowering Stephanie McMahon to make the announcement, but 2 men had to come out with her. Weird, but whatever, it's fine. She, after Triple H goes on a little bit of a preamble, she says what she says about Evolution being the first all-women's pay-per-view in the WWE. A few absurd things to dig into during that announcement. One, referring to the Give Divas a Chance hashtag and the movement. That's nice. That's like a nod to the crowd and our ability to affect the product. Saying that it was one of the things that transformed a 6-second match into a main event or into a 30-minute, Bayley versus Sasha match at NXT Brooklyn, to say that that is a shift that was created by this movement, a little kind of myopic and fucking stupid, because you are the people that made those 6-minute matches. 6-minute matches? Jesus Christ. We would have been lucky to have 6-minute matches back then. Excuse me. 6-second matches. Let alone how many of them were bra and panty, lingerie, pick a thing to put up on a pole. I think there was like a mud situation on one of these shows. Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. This is a company where it felt like for a really long time, every women's intro started with something like this. Oh. 2 things. 1, Trish Stratus, great athlete. That's a fucking absurd way to start a theme song. 2nd thing, what is the little oh at the end of that? Let's one more time. Oh. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. So to kind of abdicate that was ever something that you did. In fact, the 3 people in that ring are the people that were responsible for that. At least one of them, certainly to some extent the other 2. And say, oh, you're the ones that changed it. Regretting or failing to mention the fact that you're the one that fucked it up in the first place is kind of absurd. More absurd than all of that is the way that somebody has to, and I want to meet this person. There has to be, like, people that create seating charts for their weddings, and you have to figure out, like, who's going to be the drunk asshole, and I got to put him in the back. That's usually me. Who are going to be the people that mix well together, or maybe if they're, masochists, they want to pick the people that don't go well together, whatever. You have to go through many rounds of figuring out where people sit. That same job is given to somebody at WWE to figure out, hey, when we have these announcements on stage, whether it's a somber moment because somebody died, or it's a really exciting announcement like this one because we're doing something, not myopic for once, that person has to decide, okay, Roman, this person is like, got like a pencil in my head. They're like, all right, Roman, here we go. You are going to be in front. Circle that in. We're going to put somebody random in between. Oh, Kurt Angle. Yep, Kurt Angle's going to be there. Let's see. Who are they friends with? Seth. Okay, Seth. Seth, we're always trying to like rub you off on a Roman. You're going to be next to him. Who's the guy that pissed off Vince the last time? Like grabbed him, oh yeah, Titus. That'll be fun. It's like a social experiment. Like, will he grab him again and get suspended for another 6 months? So yeah, let's put him in the front. He's won a lot of like parenting awards, so that's great. Who's the new girl? Oh, Nikki. Okay, all right, Nikki. Spell that. Oh, 2Ks. Okay, that's interesting. Let's send her out there. Let's not tell her whether to be in character or not. And let's just see how it goes. Spoiler, she picked kind of the middle where she looked crazy but didn't act crazy, which is more crazy. So kudos to her. Actually, I take that back. Kudos to her for figuring that out. Oh, Bobby, we're pushing you. That's great. You're going to be in the back. We're going to put you in the back. Roman's the big... I don't know if you heard this. Roman's the big dog. He's going to be in the front. And so, okay, great. Can we just give me a list of 8 women? Can we just sprinkle them throughout? Let's see. Who's that short blonde one? Because if I put her in the back, nobody's going to be able to see her because she's 4 foot... Oh, 5 feet of fury. Great. Alexa is her name. Oh, that's a stripper name. Well, that's okay. Who's she friends with? Oh, Mickey... Wait, Mickey James. Thought she was dead. No, she's not. Oh, shit. Okay, Mickey James. That's great. Let's put her in. You know what? The rest of them, just make it a baker's dozen. Whatever. Just sprinkle them around. Make sure Axel's kind of on the side so we can see him look stupid. In my. Thank you for the dramatic recreation applause in your car. In my head, that gets tacked up to the wall, kind of rolls from your drama club in high school, and all the wrestlers come by and figure out okay, where am I standing? How far away from Roman am I? Roman walks over pretending that he doesn't care, but he actually really does care because it's all part of his shtick. And Seth wants to pretend to be okay that Roman is kind of scooping his shit, but is secretly kind of pissed, so he's walking around in kind of a gloomy mood. Goldust is there for some reason in my version of events. Whatever it is, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that they go down to the level of where people are allowed to stand. God forbid Roman Reigns stand 10 feet to the left or right of goddamn fucking center of that camera when we know that it's going to be shown a number of times. There were a million absurd things about that segment and about every segment after that, which I would call pandering. And maybe next week we will get into it because it's completely ridiculous to shoehorn a reference to the women's pay-per-view from every male superstar that is... God damn it, I called them superstars. The marketing is working on me. Every male wrestler who is on TV has to say something encouraging and kind of pandering about women. That's ridiculous. That is not in the spirit of empowerment. That's in the spirit of pandering. Regardless... I want to see it. I want. There's got to be some Twitter account somewhere where they got some mole backstage and there's a fucking seating chart for that shtick. And that is this week's show, everybody. It happens to be the first week. So thank you for either A, going back in time once this show was immensely popular and giving some of the early episodes a listen, or B, perhaps being a personal acquaintance of mine in real life, C, being my girlfriend, D, being some rando on the internet who happened to find this podcast in some other way. Thank you very much for downloading it and giving it a listen. You can always find us online at wrestlingwithsarcasm.com. All episodes are uploaded there, as well as any other things that I feel like uploading. You can find us wherever your podcasts are sold/downloaded. And if you want to talk on Twitter, if you want to interact with us on Twitter, the Twitter handle is SarcasmPod, because every fucking combination of the word wrestling and sarcasm was taken. So you can always find us at SarcasmPod. God willing, we will be back with episode 2 next week with some more absurdity to dig into. Spoiler, I feel like it's going to come from the WWE. Seems like a safe bet. Until then, give us a tweet, give us a follow, give a rate, review, subscribe to this podcast anywhere that you see it, and help people discover the show. Thanks for downloading and listening, guys. See you next week.